We have a forest in our backyard. Shall we take a peek before the movers arrive? Gorgeous beech trees. These must be ancient. Impressive bit of woodland. You're sure this is all ours? Today on the Comic Book Report, The Pit by Erik Kriek from Living the Line. Stick around and check it out. Greetings everyone, my name is Dominic and today you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today we're taking a look at our first comic book review from Living the Line. This is a publisher I've just become newly aware of, but they were gracious enough to send us a couple review copies and I have to admit this was a pretty striking entry. So we are talking today about Erik Kriek's The Pit, and wow, I have a lot to say about this book. Before we jump in though, I just want to again say thank you to Living the Line for sending over this review copy, and I thought I'd just shout out the channel sponsor, organicpricebooks.com. If you're looking to pick up your own comic book collected editions, perhaps this very book, I encourage you to check out their website. If you see anything on that site you like, you can actually use my discount code at checkout, The Comic Book Report, to save $2 off of your order. Please note if you use my affiliate link or code to make a purchase, I will earn a small commission, but it's a fantastic way to support this channel. Thank you for considering. Now let's go ahead and get started with today's comic book review. First, some quick facts about today's collection. This graphic novel was written and illustrated by Erik Kriek. The graphic novel itself was published by Living the Line in 2025. The volume itself collects, well, The Pit, and it is an oversized hardcover edition with beautiful matte paper stock, a sewn binding, and a total of 144 pages. At this time, I'd like to go ahead and issue a general spoiler warning. I will be flipping through the contents of today's collection and commenting on plot points throughout. You've been advised. I'd also like to issue a mature content warning. This graphic novel does have sequences of violence as well as one scene of sexuality nudity. I have cut around that scene for the purposes of this video, but reader discretion is advised. Okay, and here's our first dedicated look at that front cover. So this is Erik Kriek's The Pit. This was released as a graphic novel. We don't have individual issues here. I do think the art we get on this front cover is absolutely striking. I will say the interior art is a little bit different than what we see here, but it is still beautiful regardless, and you'll see a bit more of that in a moment. But yeah, I really like the kind of color palette we have on this cover. I just think it's gorgeous. Making our way to the spine of this collection, we have more of those beautiful colors observed here. We of course have the creator, Erik Kriek. We have the title of the work, The Pit. We have some ornate kind of detail work there that you definitely see in the work itself. And along the bottom, we have the logo for Living the Line, of course the publisher of this graphic novel. At least here in the States, I'm not sure. I think that this is a European created comic. I think that this might even be a translation if I'm not mistaken. On the back cover of this book, we have a little bit of a blurb about the collection, about the story, and we have more of those beautiful beech trees and just kind of a scenic vista. I really do like it. Again, we have some beautiful colors here. It's a really ornate and well put together book. There is no dust jacket. It's just the hardback itself with the art printed right on the board. And next, while I typically don't do this for books without a dust jacket cover, I did want to go ahead and open up the book, as I believe the cover does have a bit of a wraparound feeling to it, other than the break in the image, which of course in this case is the spine. So I'll go ahead and stretch it for you. There you can see it all. It almost looks like our main protagonist is kind of making her way out of the edge of the wood. I really liked how this looked, so I wanted to make sure I captured it for the video. And I did want to go ahead and show off the sewn binding for this work. Again, these are matte pages, but this binding is pretty good. It doesn't lay down perfectly flat. My edition doesn't have much of an eye, but again, lays down well. And because so much of the art has this kind of white border, we really don't have any issues with gutter loss, or at least certainly I didn't reading through. But of course, you'll be able to look for yourself as I do my flip through momentarily. Last thing I want to do though before we jump into the collection is just do a brief size comparison. I know I mentioned that this is an oversized hardcover edition or format, but I thought I'd go ahead and show it side by side with some other notable collected editions. So to do that, I do have here my trade paperback copy of Ultimate Invasion from Marvel Comics, and of course the Moon Knight by Jed MacKay omnibus, also from Marvel Comics. These are a couple other format size I deal with often on this channel, so I wanted to give you scale for The Pit. If you're interested in my thoughts on either of those other two collections, I of course have reviewed them on the channel already. I'll try to link the videos in case you're curious. But that Ultimate Invasion is a standard size paperback, so it's the same kind of height or trim size as a single issue comic book. That's kind of my benchmark for these formats. The omnibus edition I thought I'd stack up next to it just because this is another one of the oversized formats I review often on the channel. So The Pit is as tall as an omnibus and maybe a hair wider, but anyway, just wanted to give you some scale. Okay, and as we break into the collection proper, we're treated to some beautiful end pages that give us that woodland scape I mentioned. This is where our story is set in this small kind of woodland area in the Netherlands. But yeah, we basically go from there directly into our story, and we basically have a shot or kind of a cinematic panels that kind of go through the woods as winds blowing through it, and we're introduced to our two main protagonists, Hugh and Sarah. Basically, they are a married couple who is kind of relatively recently getting over the tragic death of their son. She was an artist and he is off kind of doing other business dealings, but after this devastating accident, the wife is left totally shattered. And as we make our way through this collection, we find out that she's been in therapy and kind of given prescription drugs for psychosis and other issues, and they basically want a fresh start. So Hugh says that he got a basically ancestral property in his family. No one really wanted it, and he went ahead and took them up on it. He's able to work either remote or kind of to fly around to do his business, and they're hoping that this will give a fresh start for Sarah to begin painting again, as she's an artist. And they find this remote kind of house out in the middle of nowhere in the Netherlands, and it needs a lot of repairs, but they're excited, or at least seemingly excited, to start. We're introduced to them right as they pull up to their property, and they find that they're in the middle of these woods, as I mentioned, all these beautiful beech trees, and they decide while they're waiting for the movers, they'll go ahead and explore a bit. They kind of have a feeling of foreboding in a way, too, and they find that some of the trees have these interesting kind of markings or sigils across them, and they're not really sure what it means. They have an overturned tree that has the roots exposed over a kind of gross little pool, and it's kind of eerie and atmospheric already. They ultimately go to the house and they kind of make their way through. It doesn't seem to be as dilapidated as they were concerned it would be, although they still need some repairs. We find out that Hugh will be going off to do business here and there, and Sarah will be left to her own devices to maybe set up a studio, try painting again. We find across this graphic novel that people from her old life, in this painting business, have a gallery held for her, and they're hoping to get some work done for her. We find that she had been seeing a therapist, but now that she's moving, she's kind of distancing herself from that, and we ultimately also see her starting to not take her meds, and we see in this new house that they are kind of experiencing some marital tension. Obviously, the loss of a child, it's rocked them. They don't really want to be intimate, or at least Sarah doesn't, and it's kind of caused some strife in the relationship. And we see her kind of waking up in the middle of the night and having these nightmares where she's drawn to that overturned tree and the pool of water, and there's some really interesting sequences here where we're not sure if she's dreaming or if it's actually happening or sleepwalking. She wakes up in her bed and it's dirty with leaves and dirt, for example, and the whole time you're kind of wondering what's going on. At one point earlier in the narrative as well, we have an elderly woman show up at the house, presumably one of the neighbors, and basically kind of cry out her warnings and saying, hey, your grief is drawing it here. It's kind of like a magnet for all of these things. You need to go before it's too late. And they kind of just say she's crazy. Her husband comes in and takes her away, whisks her out of the area. But this whole time, you're just really feeling that foreboding feeling kind of mounting. There's something really insidious about this house and about this land. And ultimately, before too long, after these episodes, the wife actually sees her dead son again. And we're not really sure why. I think immediately before this happens as well, they find a journal of an old family member that lived in the house that appears to be, in some cases, in a different language. And Sarah's left alone with this diary and begins to translate it, and we start to get more kind of interesting history, and they suggest that this property is on this kind of soft space between kind of a spiritual realm, and weird things happen here and things are drawn to the grief. And anyway, by the time she sees her son, she is all the way off her rocker, so to speak. The husband is sort of blissfully unaware of a lot of this. He's been away at work, and at one point they did have a dinner party before he left town, and their guests kind of left but were seemingly accosted, or they got in a car accident in the woods and were never really seen again. So we do have kind of police inspectors showing up and asking questions, but they're able to sort of artfully dodge them. She starts painting again, but we don't really know what's going on, and ultimately, things start to unravel fairly swiftly as the police call Hugh, the husband, as he's away, and he's scrambling to get back home. He realizes that she's been off her medication and is not really sure what's going on, and we basically have everything culminate with this son that she's seeing trying to get her to go into the waters and join him forever, and we find out that he, or maybe the wife, has been murdering people, and anyway, everything just really comes unglued in the last act. And Hugh is effectively the last man standing by the end as the story resolves. Of course, along the way, there's a ton more twists and turns. I'm not giving you absolutely everything, because I do believe if you're a fan of kind of grief, almost ghost-like stories, if you like a horror story set in the woods, this might be something more up your alley. The art is really, really gorgeous here from Erik Kriek. It's just highly detailed, and there's something about the kind of subdued or muted color palette he utilizes that really makes this story shine. It absolutely fits the narrative as well. There is something just kind of spooky generally about this work. It's not overlong either. I think it's really well paced. You really get to know these characters and a feel for them even as things begin to unravel at the seams. It is a bit grisly. It is a bit dark. Like I said, definitely mature readers suggested, not only for the violence and that scene of sexuality and nudity that I mentioned, but also just for the general tones. I think that there's a lot, and themes, there's a lot of kind of just dark, more mature content here, so that is something I'd like to advise everyone of. At the end of this graphic novel, as you've been seeing, we do have a collection of extras, which I liked. We have some different artistic renderings and things from the creators, sometimes some notes about the inspiration for certain images or scenes or how he came to certain ideas or what have you. I thought that this little gallery at the end was quite nice. Again, we don't really have a bunch of covers and things, as this was just published as a graphic novel. But yeah, I thought that this was a pretty engrossing read. It was a pretty swift read. But yeah, that really brings us toward the end of this collection. Of course, this is Erik Kriek's The Pit. And I think all that's left to do now is to give this book a grade. For this intensely character-driven horror story involving themes of grief, loss, and starting over again, the Comic Book Report is happy to give Erik Kriek's The Pit from Living the Line a B. I would consider this a well above average read, although again, as I've mentioned a few times, mature audiences suggested. I thought the art throughout this entire work was absolutely staggering. I'm a huge fan of Kriek's style. This is actually the first book of his I have ever encountered, and it really does have a lot of notable facets to it. I also think having this set in kind of the rural Netherlands area, it was something a bit different for me as a reader, and I felt myself really immersed in the setting. The characters were all very rounded and engaging, and I thought that this was an extraordinarily well-paced story. While this book might not be for everyone, it was definitely something that I considered unique. But of course, these are just a handful of my thoughts about today's book, The Pit. I'd be curious to hear yours in the comments, or if you've read anything else from Erik Kriek or from this publisher, Living the Line. Again, a huge thank you to those at Living the Line for sending this over for review. And of course, a thank you for all of you for taking this ride with me. Until next time, this has been the Comic Book Report. Please don't forget to leave your like, a comment, and maybe check out another one of my videos on your way out. Thanks everyone, and have a good one.